Hello, my name is Kristoffer Tendall. I'm a design director at IA Interior Architects in San Francisco, and a long time ago, a CED graduate in architecture. Been asked to record a quick video with some tips and tricks on portfolios, specifically in regard to looking for position at a design firm, so a professional portfolio. I think a lot of the same tips apply if you are putting a portfolio together for graduate school, but there are some particulars as far as what we look for professionally that I'll be focusing on primarily. First, I think some of the first advice I always give is that you can pick and choose a bit more than you would on a standard academic project. I think a pitfall I see sometimes with portfolios is that it's everything. It's every project, it's the full amount of stuff you created for that project, and presented very much like you did in your charrette. So I think keeping in mind that what we're looking for is your ability to think about design, your ability to communicate design, not just the final product, but the ideas behind it, the why, not just the what, and that how you can tie those things together in a cohesive piece. I think a challenge for architects and designers is that the document itself is a design exercise. Although I do see some people take that a little too far. I think the goal of the design of the document itself is to simply look cohesive and of a single hand. If you don't need to stand out, but it does need to look like it was a crafted document. And that can be done by creating your own standard template, using a consistent palette across even the diagrams you put together, plans in similar layouts. I think there are little touches that can really make your portfolio come across quite well. I think the other thing, as far as a first step, is to edit. I think each project that you're showing often will have been a semester or maybe even a full year of work and study. And you know everything about that project. You've thought about it to the level of details, and the layout of the restrooms has an amazing story behind it. But you're not going to be able to communicate all that in a portfolio. So really spend some time on each project thinking about the core idea, some of the core topics you were exploring, that you were thinking about, that you were trying to solve, and make sure that what you're showing clearly supports that, that you're telling a concise story over the 3 or 4 pages per project that you're showing. For example, oftentimes in school, you'll be given a list of what you need to do. Do a floor plan for each floor, do 3 cross sections, do a rendered view. And part of that is to develop your skills and your thought. When you're at a portfolio, a page of just blank plans doesn't really get across your vision, and it doesn't read. You do need to consider that the first time your portfolio is viewed, it will be without you there to speak to it. I've had internship positions that had over 280 applicants for one position. We can't bring everyone in, and we can't even spend a ton of time in a first pass. The first pass is usually eliminating people to get to a tight list of who really stood out. So your design work has to speak to your thought alone and visually. So you can still show all those same pieces, but make sure they're advancing your story. Add a layer of diagram, color, notation to a plan, to a section, so that you're not just showing a final result, but you're showing the ideas behind it graphically. Because that's the other thing. Text is great, but anything more than a line or two will likely be skimmed over. So even if you do bring in a paragraph, make sure to think about even there what the core concepts are, so that you can pop out some pieces of text, some words, icons, graphics, to really tie your project to the concept. That's not just for the tactical reason of communicating quickly. It's also what we look for professionally. When we're presenting to a client, different than school where you're presenting to a design professor, we're often presenting to people who have no background in design. So we need to visually communicate the thought behind it, the reason what we're showing makes sense, and how it ties to what we know about them, what we've learned about them, what we've learned about the site, why this is the right choice versus the infinite possibility. So that's something I think is really important. I think the things that separate even the next level would be looking at your projects as a body of work. Is there a consistent type of concept you're studying? Is there something you're thinking about and you're exploring it in different ways? Is there something that ties your projects together? And I think graphically as well, if there is some diagramming you're doing in one or two colors or one or two types, you're using some icons, take a pass through your portfolio to make sure that it doesn't need to be identical, but it wants to be from the same vocabulary. And that can be a really good thing to spend a few hours on, taking what you may have done on different projects and making it look a little more cohesive. Again, that's something we do on our end. There's a reason we're looking for that, because when we're going after a project, we may take different project plates, put them together as our breadth of work. And if they look like they came from 4 different firms, we're not coming across very well. So it's a skill you'll use professionally, not just what we're looking for. I think too, resisting the urge to go chronologically. I think that's most of the ones I see usually do, start early design, move through to thesis. And that's fine. But if there's a different arc to your story and to your projects, think about it as a story. You want a strong beginning, you want a strong end, and the middle wants to connect those two. That may not be chronologically. Maybe one of your strongest projects was an early exploration, and that could be a really good beginning, or the capper that brings everything together. But step back a bit and let yourself think about the projects you're showing in a way that's a little broader that way, so that you can tell the story. I think a standard or a common kind of misstep is showing it chronologically and then tucking some supplemental type work, whether it's photography, sculpture, at the end. And it's sort of always a flat moment when we're meeting together in an interview, because it isn't your strongest piece at the end. And so we're left kind of looking at a picture of some watercolors, which, to address that point, the supplemental stuff is fine. Ideally design related. But I would say even more compelling is when that relates to some of these same explorations you're looking in your project. A lot of people, and I know at Berkeley, have the project where they need to build something. They need to design and build something. And the reason for that, to teach architecture students, is about how the materiality and the construction and the connection of things inform design. How that, just the physicality of that creates a better design. And so tying that to some part of your other projects, maybe that's a connective tissue in your portfolio. Maybe you've explored an idea here, and then here was this exploration, and that gave you a great idea for the next project. Same with photography. If there's a theme about light or form or social justice or something that you're exploring in your photographs that's also in your projects, tie it into a project, rather than just kind of tack it on as an appendix at the end. Otherwise, it's kind of a nice thing, but it doesn't really move the needle. Those are the main pieces I'd say. I think if you do those few things, it would probably rise to that top 5% that we see. There's a lot of portfolios we see that are either too long. If you think about someone is going to skim through this in probably 3 to 5 minutes the first time, and then even when you're in an interview, you're probably going to want to spend no longer than a half hour to 40 minutes because you'll want some time to talk. So another downfall I see is really long portfolios, and people are skipping through the images really quick and there's no time to get to it. I'll also say that it is certainly better to have strong projects rather than the most projects. In one of those pieces I was talking about, where we had hundreds of applicants for a single position, the person who ended up getting it submitted a 4-page portfolio. That's all. And he was an undergrad, and he had not had the experience in school yet to really explore all his ideas. So what he submitted was 1 academic project and 3 design competitions he'd entered. And so each one, there was only 4 spreads, 4 projects, so 1 project per spread, but a very consistent level of self-editing, of clarity, of idea and execution. If he had done the same thing and then tacked on 4 more pages of, early explorations that wasn't quite as strong, it wouldn't have been as good. So focusing on what's strong rather than trying to show the whole breadth. I think that's another really common piece that's hard to self-edit. It's similar to the advice I give as far as presentation, where never talk about what you didn't like about the project or what you tried and didn't work, or, don't sell against yourself, basically. We don't need to necessarily know all of that churn. We want to know about the ideas and where it landed. Those are the things that pop off right off the top of my head. I did want to share an example that I think might help illustrate some of these things. I'm not going to show a portfolio because I think what I want to show is one of our professional design pieces, because it incorporates some of the things I'm talking about, and also is the reason we're looking for these kind of things. We're looking for someone who can execute this level of design, thought, and communication. So the piece I'm going to show is a design vision piece. So it didn't even go into hard building design yet. It was really just about analyzing a site, analyzing a problem, acknowledging some of the goals for the project, and then illustrating a thought process on how a concept can come together and how that can play out in the physical space. And everyone is just going to have to deal with the fact that this project was at Stanford. So that's how it is. Being a CED grad, I did sneak some blue and gold into the color palette, but that's just because I'm not very mature. So I'm going to share this and we'll walk through just some of those things that I was talking about earlier. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a design vision piece. This was a project for the Stanford School of Medicine, and the project itself was taking an existing building that was a little problematic in that it was this weird starfish. It had been 6 different buildings, had been connected together. It was in an area where they were not allowed to touch the outside, so it was going to be completely gutting the inside, but they wanted to create this really special place. A lot of these buildings around it are part of Stanford as well. This is off campus in Palo Alto. It's the Stanford Research Park, but they had a goal for this project to be the heart of this, to create a campus-like feel without touching the outside. So starting just by kind of acknowledging that location, taking a look at some of the existing conditions, since these were set, we wanted to communicate what was there, both in the negative side on the bottom left. This is an old 70s building with some pretty unfortunate exteriors, but also the possibilities and opportunities. Because of its weird shape, it had this really beautiful interior courtyard with winding paths, different views, mature planting, and a really nice outdoor environment. We did show the existing conditions. This was kind of a peach of a project in that the existing conditions in the interior were so bad, pretty much anything we could do could improve it. But this also shows kind of the starting point. You know, this is what we have to solve, and this is what we have, the raw material we have to work with. And then pulling back and doing some thinking about what that concept can be that can start forming the architecture. So for this project, we came up with a concept of the heart as far as an organizational campus-wide concept, being that place that other buildings will come to. The idea of a geode, since we couldn't touch the exterior and it was kind of rough and ugly, creating something beautiful inside. And then the idea of a river. One of the challenges of this project being so separated was having a flow and a connection through. So first tackling the heart. This is a picture of a building on the Stanford School of Medicine campus that is acknowledged as the on-campus heart, the Li Ka-shing Center. And so giving that just visual indication that this is what we're trying to create in the research park. And from a document standpoint, I want to point out how simple these slides are. You know, a single image, a single word, moving the concept forward can be much clearer quickly, and also has a clarity to how the deck progresses. So talking about the heart, so now showing our project in the maroon, and then how those other buildings not only surround, but how people would move towards the heart. So just kind of setting again that context. This also, it underlines the concept, but it also shows how we would anticipate people are moving to the building and how that can help craft the space. And then looking inside the building, you know, how are people coming? Even within the building, we identified a certain area that would be that gathering space. This would be a workplace for research professors and faculty. But this idea of what would draw people to this building, because it sure wasn't the exterior. So what we came up with was that the way this group communicates and gathers is in the form of seminars, sharing their research, talking about their research, discussing their findings. But they didn't have a world-class space to do that. There was a seminar space in another building, but it kind of looked like a church basement, had low ceilings, no light. It was bad. So thinking about that as the draw. So visually communicating that, you know, here we have these different buildings. We have another building that's clearly shown separate. The movement paths are in the same color to show that these are people drawing to this space. They are different widths based on how many people they would be. We've got the different modes of people coming. We're hinting at that green connective tissue, and that's it. We're not getting into doors, names, walls, anything. And then getting into the concept of a geode and what that means and what it means to them. You know, the rough exterior, alluring interior, an attraction point. I think this is the kind of thing that is really missing from most portfolios I see, which are heavily slanted towards final product, plans, sections, you know, 3D views, and not as much about what was the concept and idea that got you there. Why was this solution the right solution? And then more about gathering. So showing that what this thing about gathering can be, how that can be above and beyond what they already have, and what the value can be. That isn't their space on the left, but it very well could have been. And then getting at the existing pieces that we've got. Then showing with a simple diagram what we can do to that building to create these goals. In this case, go back to show the existing, the space was just chopped up with all kinds of little pieces. Lots of walls that made gathering and open space hard to do. So the big move was to just break through that, you know, crush through that place to create that flow and connection that we wanted to do. And this diagram is just about that, correcting those program points that can move through. And then how we're doing that in elevation as well. So this going up to another level with the same goal. These kind of diagrams are really great to have in your portfolio because it does give us a hint into what the thought is. And then how that actually happens with real space. So in this case, talking about a seminar space that also could be a flexible place to gather as far as a pub, a kitchen, utilizing the outdoor deck, and really taking that concept to the next level. We're showing the rest of the plan, but the graphics focus on the piece that we're talking about. This idea was about how it can be reconfigured. So as a best use of space, not just a seminar space, which might be used a couple times a week, but showing how it can also be a place for a broader audience. And then getting into the concept of a river. So this again, as a simple image to set the start of the concept before we walk through the plan. And in this case, now we're talking about not just people coming from outside the place, but also moving within the building. So the concept here is, again, the plan with all the walls in our final design, but gets really tight to what the concept is that we're trying to start with. As far as movement through the building, in this case, showing that we're emphasizing movement outside the building, taking advantage of that green space, and tying the idea of space making to concept. The flow of this building in an existing standpoint was terrible. You could not understand where you were in the building before. So trying to make it a clear point of design that we want to move through. And here's a way, some of these things we can show with a reason. So this is a cross section. We are showing a section of what we're creating, but we've also got some inspiration images to show the reason for that, the type of environment we're trying to create. And the section is there to communicate how that happens from where you enter the building to the left and how you can move down through the building into this type of space. This section also shows 2 new skylights we're bringing in to create that visual stepping stone. So it is a cross-section of a complex building, but it's there to tell part of the story. And then what we tried to do is bring in some of these 3D views, even at a really early concept stage, and start showing how you actually move through the building. So this is a pretty rough walkthrough to show that space, and already how the lobby is much more open, how there's a visual indication of where the seminar space is based on signage. All of this to the greater goal of being that heart of the campus. There's a reason we're showing this particular walkthrough, because this is what the project really was about at a broader scale, and what the experience of someone coming to this space would be. We've been using this more and more as an early design tool. So this is straight out of Revit. We're completely out of Revit, along with an Enscape mod on. But this is specifically simple. We're not talking about finishes. We're not talking about what the lighting is. We're purely talking about space and tying it to concept. And more of those. But each of these do, even graphically as they're here, a couple views to show the difference between the existing and how we're improving it. This is from the same spot. So one of their challenges before was this monumental lobby and stair that cut off circulation. How we're pulling that back. We're creating a bigger open space, a gathering space, a node in the middle. A walkthrough to show that, a quick plan showing where the walkthrough is in relation to the plan, just to give some clarity to someone who's not as familiar. And then you can see a really common visual language as we move through these. And that's it. So that's the piece that I think obviously a portfolio is going to have a little more information than that. But the reason I wanted to show this one in particular is because that's the level of concept communication that I think really takes portfolios to the next level. Being clear, being concise, and bringing in the ideas behind it just as much as the final product. So that is pretty much what I can think of as far as how to help you. I would say, in general, looking at professional design award submissions or publications on websites or magazines, I think that's a good guide for the same type of thing. The same challenge is in an article about a project as it is in a portfolio, as far as needing to communicate it quickly and broadly. So I think those are all things to look at as you look at your pieces. So hopefully that was a help, and good luck.